Respect trains. That is the message from KiwiRail as they promote Rail Safety Week. In the past decade, 27 people have been killed in collisions with trains. A further 54 seriously injured. But that's not the only issue the state-owned enterprise obviously is facing, you will have heard in the news. The government's given it 2 years to sort out its finances, and Treasury wants it shut down altogether. So is there any way to fix it, or is the writing on the wall? KiwiRail Chief Executive Peter Reidy is with me now. Peter, good morning to you.
Good morning, Paul.
Thanks for coming in. You have been the Chief Executive since early 2014.
That's correct.
So not very long.
It feels like a long time.
I'm sure it does. It has been an interesting year of subsidies and more subsidies from the taxpayer, hasn't it?
It has, Paul, and I think what's important is we have this conversation about the true value of rail. What's been really positive is the comments we've had from customers like Mainfreight around the reason why they need rail in this country. And
around yes, indeed, around the
discussion
the network
that we're keen to have.
All right. Treasury have recommended closing the network down. It's too expensive. We constantly have to throw money at it. The value of the network is disintegrating before our eyes. If Treasury think it should be closed down, why do you think they are wrong?
It's an interesting discussion. There are a number of options put to Treasury, and we work with Treasury on them. And government really committed to 2-year funding. They announced when those papers came out that they'd commit to another 2 years funding for $400 million. So they're very, very positive. There were a number of options.
But Treasury were not positive, were they? Treasury looked at all of this. They had the conversation with you, and in their conversation with the government, they said close them down. And
that's one view of rail. If you look at the true value of rail, which is the cost to the country if rail wasn't here, imagine 1.4 million trucks on the road.
Why are Treasury not looking at that?
It's a number of options they look at. Our job is to look at the business in a commercial manner. But if you look at rail on both counts, accounting-wise and also the public benefit, I don't think New Zealanders would want another 27,000 trucks on their road per week, or even in Auckland, 900 per week. That's not taken into consideration when we look at the whole thing.
Okay, now your yarn here as the CEO is that the cost and the value of KiwiRail are two quite different things.
Correct.
So the cost is mitigated by the value. In that, we would have greater costs that we would have to pay in other areas if we weren't subsidising KiwiRail.
That's correct. Imagine life without main rail here. We're a small country. We need to trade.
Well, for most people, they can imagine it quite easily because they never use it.
We, as a freight business, New Zealand needs to trade, so they rely on KiwiRail to move freight to ports around the country. And I think if you spoke to Fonterra and Mainfreight and Toll and Port of Tauranga, they're very, very supportive, and the freight growth we've had talks about that. If you look at not having rail in this country...
Freight growth, but you're not making any money. You're still losing a considerable amount of money. Are you losing more now than before?
Considerable, many, many years of underinvestment, Paul. You can imagine this corridor hasn't had the investment for many years. The government's now putting money in, and it's making a real difference. So there's big changes in KiwiRail, and we've seen that with customers come on board, and strong freight growth. You're now seeing a lot more freight growth than 5 years ago.
But you're not making any money out of it, are you? And so this is why this is quite a complicated conversation. Because on the surface of it, I should be able to say to you, if you can't stand on your own 2 feet, you should perish. You know, because that's how businesses should run. And God knows this country has enough to fork out of the tax take. We're paying for hospitals, we're paying for education. Why should we have to pay for KiwiRail? Make a go of it or disappear. But then your argument is, as we've been saying, if you disappear, it's going to cost us more. Have you costed out how much more?
There's lots of services in New Zealand, and the government's made the decision that New Zealanders need rail for New Zealand to grow as an export nation. It's particularly heavy rail. So when you look at the true value of rail...
Well, I say again, why would Treasury be recommending it closing down if what you've just said is true?
There's a number of options, Paul, that they looked at, and I think we need to have the debate. That's a discussion we need to have. It's a healthy discussion.
Yeah.
And when you have that discussion, customers come out quite strongly, and the government's come out quite strongly saying, we don't agree with Treasury and we'll carry on funding KiwiRail.
Okay.
There is work we have to do to make the business more efficient, and that's happening.
Okay, but we do not want to be funding a job creation program.
That's correct.
Okay, TransAlpine passenger service. So this is, if you like, this passenger service is in a way a window on KiwiRail.
Correct.
Solid Energy is an absolute cock case. Yes, it's got to go. Do you? I mean, you're a CEO working for one of our large corporates, government-owned corporates. Do you think Solid Energy has to go?
They're in a difficult place.
It's a cock case. It's yesterday's fuel.
They have a lot of debt.
Okay. Do you use coal in your trains?
No, we have diesel
exactly.
trains.
And nobody else uses coal on trains anymore either, or anywhere else. So Solid Energy has to go. But you are dependent on carting coal around. for the TransAlpine passenger service to run. So if you follow your logic, you're saying, well, we should actually continue to subsidise Solid Energy so that they can continue to subsidise you so that some passengers can go on the TransAlpine.
No, the Solid Energy is a separate commercial discussion. We're working very strongly with Solid Energy right now.
Can you survive if they don't?
Yes, there's a number of options we'd have to look at. I think the TransAlpine has grown 20% per annum, strong tourism growth.
But it can't pay for itself.
We have other customers over there, Paul Westland Dairy. There's strong growth on that rail line. If Solid Energy did go into liquidation, then there's a number of scenarios we'd have to look at, and we're not there yet at all. We're still working very strongly with Solid Energy.
Okay, so if I say to you, if Solid Energy goes, the TransAlpine is dead. None of those other scenarios are going to make up the capacity that Solid Energy uses. I'd be right, wouldn't I?
No, that's not. If you look at it from a tourism perspective, the TransAlpine's a critical part of the tourism network in New Zealand.
Yeah.
So I think it's a scenario we'd have to look at, and we'd have to talk to all of our stakeholders.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I listen to you speak, and I think it would be such a shame to lose it, but can we afford to keep it? And that obviously is the debate we have to have.
Absolutely.
I thank you so much for coming in, Peter. Pleasure talking to you. Peter Reidy is KiwiRail Chief Executive.